most notably Kevin He. It's his NHL draft a year, just finished that up. He's going into the NHL draft with high hopes. Where do you see Kevin He kind of slotting right now? Where do you have him in your rankings? And what impressed you from the IceDogs number 11 this year?
I think we're looking at a guy who could be a third or fourth round pick. The thing that obviously stands out there is the speed. And watching him very closely in his OHL draft year, that was evident from day one. That guy can fly. It seemed like he was always smiling, having a good time too. It seemed like the teammates that no matter who he lined up with, just got along with him really well. So there was that. Very agile skater, very good in that. His puck control is awesome too. I think, you see him on the rush there, and he can control it. He's got good hands. He finds open space really well, things like that. I guess I would love to see him shoot more, because I do think he's got the good shot there. But when it comes to just what he does with his feet and how he can drive the play like that, I know that's something teams are looking for, because you need to be able to skate in today's NHL. And that's the thing. You could see guys who have the skill, the shot, the physicality, but if they can't skate, they can't keep up, and teams aren't interested. With Kevin, it's you can clearly see the skating there is one of the bigger elements of his game, and it makes him probably, I'd say, one of the better skaters in this draft class.
What do you think? I totally agree. He's been one of the more fun skaters to watch, not just from an IceDog standpoint, but just from in the OHL. When it comes to a mid-round pick, obviously after like the first and second rounds, there's a big drop off in either the chance to make the NHL and things like that. What does a mid-round pick have to do to stand out in after they've been drafted in the OHL? From your perspective and what you've found throughout the last few years, what do they need to do? Is it just like point per game? Is it like a physicality thing for them to get a real shot and move on to maybe be a pro?
I think when you're not like a star prospect, when you're not a first rounder, I think the key you're looking for is finding ways to make yourself more useful outside of, if you are a one-dimensional player, trying to find something that makes you a more well-rounded player, because everybody wants to play in the top six. And if you're playing in the top six in your junior team, that's great, but so are so many other players in so many different levels. So there's so many spots to compete with there. And if you're a guy who's not a 60 goal scorer in the OHL, you're not a superstar, you might end up being a bottom six player. So you got to find ways to be valuable there, whether it be that work ethic, whether it be the hockey IQ, whether it be the defensive play. Coaches love guys who are smart and commit defensively, especially if you're a forward there. So being able to kind of really round your game out and make yourself so valuable in different situations. One example of that is Cole Baudouin of the Barrie Colts. Guy put up some pretty good numbers this year, but what we saw in that second half was him blocking shots, hitting guys, doing all those things that make him so valuable. So finding roles like that, that can show to the coach that they can put you in different situations, that versatility is going to go a long way.
And when you talk about Kevin, when he was a 16-year-old, he tied Akil Thomas for the franchise goal record as a 16-year-old. Ryan Robert broke that this year, which we'll get into. But it seemed like Kevin, he was one of those guys that was one of the more genuinely players in the league last year. And this year, he added a little bit more bite to his game. He was getting in a few more scrums. He was getting more penalty minutes, as Cam and I alluded to this year. What have you seen from Kevin? Maybe is that something that scouts were looking for, as far as seeing a little bit more of that fight and tenacity from him? We know he's a respectful guy off the ice, but adding that portion to his game to make that more translatable to a pro hockey career.
For sure, yeah, because again, like you look at that, and I remember watching him really closely at the OHL Cup, where he only had 1 point, but I thought that he still created a lot of opportunities there for North York, and then he gets drafted. I thought last year he had a pretty good rookie season. Obviously, the 21 goals looks great there. And this year, again, he put up 31. But he had to show he was more than just a guy who can skate and score. And the fact that he was willing to get a bit physical, whether it be during a play, whether it be after the play, teams like that, guys who, again, going back to just being more well-rounded, it's someone who's willing to stick up for their teammates, willing to kind of take players out of their headspace. Those guys are valuable. So yeah, that is something I know I was looking forward to hope seeing him kind of improve that level, and I thought he looked pretty good there.
When it comes to this, more of a broader question in terms of OHL teams and the IceDogs specifically, if he is to get drafted, which I think we can assume that he's going to be, he'd be the first drafted player since, I believe, Tomasino from Nashville. How big is it for a team that has struggled in the standings over the last few seasons to get a drafted player in the NHL? Does it really add a lot in terms of scouts coming out or just other players that are on the team getting more looks to potentially be drafted?
For sure. When you got one guy, like I know an example is you look at the London Knights and everyone was kind of keeping an eye on Sam Dickinson this year, but then they were like, oh, well, Sam O'Reilly's pretty good there too. And that opportunity, I think, is really interesting. And I got an article coming out kind of on guys who are more underrated players that are going to potentially get drafted. And then one here is I've never actually had to say his last name out loud, but Urban Podrakar.
Yeah, Urban Podrakar. Yeah.
Yeah, Podrakar. So he's a guy that I know scouts are looking at here, and I've got an article coming out soon about how part of it is we don't see a lot of Slovenian players drafted, so that's very cool. But I think people are looking at his smarts, the way he moves the puck, and are actually quite impressed. And so opportunities like that kind of open up when you watch when you go and see a guy that's kind of on everyone's radar. And it helps obviously being the OHL because there are so many scouts in this area, and so many of those same scouts were following guys at the GTHL level and kind of saw them grow. But then you go out there and find guys you may have not seen. And, a player coming from Slovenia last year to come play in the OHL, that's a bit of a culture shock. But that's kind of a situation where there's ripple down effects that are positive.